Hey, it's Chris. So, half of 2024 is pretty much over, right? And this isn't going to be talking about what's upcoming, whole separate video as well. This isn't going to be the best things I played all year so far, different video as well. This is what has most impressed me, what has most let me down, the highs and the lows so far of 2024. Crowdfunding, retail, and news. All of those. So think my Saturday normal video where we get into the fun stuff, but all of that condensed into one video. The highlights, the lowlights, the bush lights. I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's just go. Cold open over. Let's start with the crowdfunding, right? Things that launched so far this year that are falling in with those categories that we just talked about, right? And we're going to make this a little bit of a sequential. We're not going to do them in any particular order, but try and keep them a little bit chronological. And we had at the beginning of the year, Allplay. And this is the trend, I'll say, that's going to loop in with this as a whole, right? Allplay bringing Sakura Slam, Kabuto Sumo expansion back to crowdfunding. $630,000. If you don't think small box games, if you don't think multi-game campaigns on crowdfunding are here to stay, Allplay and 25th Century Games have some words for you. Now, point to go along with that as a counterpoint, you don't buy all of them. You don't buy all of them. You don't buy all of them. Buy more, you lose more. Buy more to spend more, to lose more, to save more. Marketing side of things. And so is this, though, something you're willing to establish, something you're willing to grow? You do not need, and this is the other good point to go along with this, right? No miniatures. Because, as we'll talk about in a second, that is also where a significant portion of the cash is still. So if you're wondering why you see one or two of those games every single month, well, that's the reason. It's because they bring in the... Anyway, we'll get there in a second. But that's impressive. Allplay's track record is speaking for itself. Bitewing is now of the same line as 25th Century and Allplay in the same sense. And now with some collaboration between Bitewing and Allplay for some of the distribution, whatever, production, I don't know, whatever, they're doing together, all of that stuff, some of that stuff, mix of that stuff. It's a good pipeline. Is it all needed to be crowdfunded? Again, whole different topic, whole different debate, whole different video. We'll get there in a second about how I feel about that as a different aspect. It's good to see small box games doing well, period. Now, next one, again, we'll talk about this. Earthborn Rangers. This one ties over similarly, this and Slay the Spire, right? Games that were very aggressive in their different approach to the crowdfunding side of things in terms of the gameplay, right? Not modeling themselves after, significantly the copying of things we are used to. Variations. Also not saying totally innovative at the same time, right? Innovative is a scary word, as I said several times on this channel. But where I'm going with this is that they knocked it out of the park. And again, giving them the opposite of the kiss of death, right? The exact opposite of that, the kiss of sell out everywhere stock-wise, essentially. And so that was the big question with both of these. And I'll make the argument that, especially with Earthborn Rangers, I still will say on the short list of games that are not for you. I did a whole separate video on this. I haven't decided whether I'm going to air it or not. Games that you should never buy. This is on that list, along with Oath, along with Kingdom Death Monster, right? Games like that, Root, where you don't have the appeal from an actual mechanistic get it played standpoint. Because that's the other thing that's going to go along with these. Too many times do I see people buying games off of recommendations. I just talked about this in another video, but it's worth bearing and repeating again in the same sense. Someone selling on a social media site, reminiscing, vocalizing, so-and-so thought this game was amazing balls, right? And you should buy it because so-and-so thought it was amazeballs this way. But they're selling it, which illustrates my point in a nutshell. When you buy games based off of other people's recommendations, whether it's top retail games of the month or whatever else it may be, right? Top crowdfunding games of the month, right? We'll just point back at me. Point back at me, not at anybody else. Not throwing any shade here. I give a disclaimer with every single time. If I'm biased towards it, if I think it's a good game, or is it actually good for you? Who is it right for? Who is it right for? Because the marketing hype machine on our hobby wants to sell you every single game for every single person. Everybody needs 37 campaigns, scenario-driven, dungeon crawl, narrative, open world sandbox adventures with customizable, personal stories. And you need 47 3-hour-long Euro games with 50-page rulebooks, right? But no, this one's unique. This one's unique, Chris. So we just need to pause, T for timeout, and say, really? Is this really what I need? Is this right for me? I have talked about plenty of games in this channel that I said, this is an amazing game, ... for somebody else, right? And that's okay. There's a couple reviewers out there that do that exact thing. Like my personal score, shelf side, I think. They do my personal score and then the score for other people that are liking this sort of thing. And that is so applicably useful, right? Practicality matters. From a practical me to you, and you practical what's going to work on your table. Let's go over to Thunder Road Vendetta, right? I'm going to say stock up on this one. Big surprise. Again, 7 figures on crowdfunding. Just massively, I would say overachieving. This game is the epitome of it shouldn't be this fun. It shouldn't be this good. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. And yet, here we are. Nearly $7 million on crowdfunding, which is just a smashing testament to the absolute hit or miss that is, well, for me, from Restoration Games. Because again, this is the point I guess I'll make with this little side tangent bunny trail at the end here. I back games. I don't back companies, right? And let me be distinctly clear on this, because I love supporting indie publishers, right? Love it. Absolutely have done tons of it. There's a reason I talk about the Japanese designers on the crowdfunding roundups all the time, right? I love highlighting the small indie stuff just as much as I love ranting for 16 minutes. I'm Grin Coven. We'll get there. But the thing is, I don't just blindly back any game that comes from a company that I love or that has put out a good game track record, whatever it may be in the past, right? I struggle with things like strategist pledges from Chip Theory Games. I struggle with what Galactic Cruise and their situation did the same thing. And then, which we'll talk about in a second too. And then I struggle with Stonemaier Champions for the same reasons, right? It just drives the consumerism that I try to help you avoid in the first place. And again, it's this delicate dichotomous balance of support the businesses and the publishers you like and want to see succeed, and you don't want to see them go out. At the same time, how much marketing, how much, kind of really? Okay, is it just from that standpoint? And the honest answer is, I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. I mean, that's why the whole Launchboom thing is so sketchy, because I know a lot of the people behind, the thoughts and of the ideas of publishers with that are well-meaning and good-intentioned. But it's also something that I just don't really feel like it's good business practice from the consumer side of things. So how do you reconcile when two things are clearly going head-to-head? You don't extreme view it, is what you don't do. You don't say it's all evil or it's all bad, because one of the crowdfunding games that's live shortly after the time of me filming this said that anything we collect, Launchboom style, pre-order, reserve your $1 sort of thing, we are literally donating all of those proceeds to a charity. How do you can't black and white it. We need to make sure it doesn't get black and white. We need to make sure it doesn't fall down the slope or the edge of, precipice of disaster, but we need to be nuanced and have nuanced conversations about it, which is all I do on my channel, right? Like nuanced conversations. No, I bring up topics that are of interest that need to get talked about that aren't getting talked about widely elsewhere all the freaking time. Let's go to Earth. Earth abundance, right? Again, slim shy of $1 million, but for, again, an expansion for a game, non-miniature, card-driven, slight, tiny deluxifications from wooden components, getting $1 million. I'm impressed. Color me impressed. Now, again, it isn't my absolute world beater #1 game like it is for other people's. It wasn't on my top 10 for 2023. Will this expansion change that? I don't know. Has it grown on me, to use the excuse of the dad pun there? Yeah, a little bit. I don't know where it's going to fall up for me in that sense. I haven't been willing to get rid of it, though. This illustrates the point, again, that if you put out a very, 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 very solid product in the first place, you don't need to necessarily do some of the FOMO tactics. You don't necessarily need to do some of the extremities from the deluxifications or the whatever else you want to say, right? Under an hour and a half length games are not a 4-letter word, folks. They're fantastic to start with a different F word to go along with that, right? So I just love the rise of this. So it just has to be talked about. Now we're going to go the opposite way here for a second, because two bigger productive games, A Tale of Two Cities, right? We have on one hand Galactic Cruise, which was by far and away the most successful Euro on crowdfunding this year, again from a first-time company, which again proves that you can have a good product and, well, be a first-timer. Because I see that comment all the time, especially on Reddit. Reddit has a hard-on for saying first-time designer on crowdfunding is a red flag. I don't know what people's deal is with that, right? Yes, it's something to be aware of, but no, it doesn't need to be a, So that was something there. We'll see. Again, it falls in the Venn diagram of very niche gamers of, the ones that get the 3-hour games and the ones that get the 3-hour games are all lining up together. Just like the thing I said earlier about the dungeon crawl lifestyle aspects of things, where if you got one, you got 30. So again, being facetious, you know what I mean though. And then Cysmic, which raised a very much more interesting point with one of their later updates at the end of the campaign, which I debated about, doing a full video on as well, which was talking specifically about fake pledging and the concern about it there with a backer who, basically put in a pledge for $8,000 to get them over the hump of funding and then slowly peeled it away. And Jason, the designer's comments and updates on it from that standpoint and his viewpoints from how that has affected things, and just the illumination of how fake all of the stuff that goes with crowdfunding is in the first place. How fake crowdfunding has become, right? Stretch goals funded in X seconds, minutes, days, hours, millions of years, funded X percentage of funding goal, right? Whatever it may be. And how fake that is. Not even the whole TCG style of things, which who knows if half the TCGs are just like laundering money, just kidding. Or if they're really going to actually deliver any sort of decent product with any sort of actual tread or backing significant at the retail side of things in such a heavy market in the first place. And so those are the issues raised. And how do you feel about that, right? Like that was the whole thing with Launchboom. That was the whole problem I had with Launchboom earlier in the year. And I guess this is a good segue into that issue, is that, they were basically advocating for being deceiving. Not like marketing and trying to make it seem better and trying to pump your product, but just like actually being deceitful to your customers, right? And that is a significant sin in my eyes. Again, I don't know what else to call it. Fault? It's bigger than a fault. It's just, lying, right? And there's not many things that piss me off more than that. So that whole debacle is just still looming over things and still just makes you wonder at times too. But at the same time, I don't wonder. I don't wonder and think half these campaigns have fake backers. No, they don't. No, they don't. There's too many griping comments in the comment section to be fake. Anyway, we'll segue here. Let's go over to things that I was, again, sort of disappointed by, but also things that tie into a little bit broader of the news side of things, right? And we're going to start off with CMON. We're going to start off with CMON and Gamefound, basically doing this weird, awkward handshake, just like I'm doing right here on camera, and saying, we're going to go over to you and you're going to host all of our products. And when I say host all of our products, now we have seen pre-orders. We've also seen crowdfundings. And again, the details are still next to nothing on what sort of arrangement, what sort of deal. We've seen now pre-orders come up a couple times with Gamefound without a whole lot of rationale about who can do what or why or how. I also saw in one of the more recent crowdfunding roundups, all of a sudden, there's going to be stores just from random companies on Gamefound as well. And so what the deuce is going on with that? Like, I think realistically what's going on there, and this is just pure speculation, pure conspiracy theory speculation, right? It's not really a conspiracy theory. I'm just making things up to trigger people. What I think is going on though, is that they're just trying to be the one all be all of everything, right? They're trying to take the role of publisher, distributor, store, front, just every single role on the board game scene. They're trying to be the one-stop shop for everything. And I think that's been great for some of the larger companies who get a better rate, fee, discount on their side of things when they go through them. But with some of these smaller ones, I dare say, again, and I'm always wrong, right, that some of the smaller ones have still struggled significantly to get traction. Because also, I mean, I say this on a weekly roundup almost, routinely, that the presentation of some of those smaller ones is overshadowed, right? It's hard to tell which one's launched because you've got the same three that are raising you the most money blasted on the front page. And then you've got, that front page filled with half a dozen others that have ended, that are in various states of pledge manager or late backing or upcoming. And so it doesn't always work out from that side of things as well. I don't have any data. It's all anecdotal, just week by week looking at things and having to go try and find stuff myself on a daily basis. So that has to be mentioned. But along with this, again, I just wonder, right? Like CMON, with their last two campaigns, Degenesis Clan Wars and God of War. God of War, I would make the argument that God of War, even more so, Degenesis was an unknown. Degenesis was a complete unknown. It's a skirmish style game. It's miniature driven. It's, again, heavily saturated on the skirmish and miniature side of things. And to be honest with you, prior to them launching it, I don't have a clue about the IP whatsoever. So that getting, $339,000 doesn't shock me as much, right? But God of War somehow only getting $800,000, right? Around the semblance of Mordred from 2023 should surprise you, should shock you. It goes, why? Why did this fail? And I raised the point sort of half jokingly during the campaign, is this just CMON saturation? Because literally, CMON has apparently gone with we are doing something every single month on Gamefound, whether it is a pre-order or a campaign. Literally so far. July's already scheduled out with DC Superheroes United. And I'm sure August has got something else on that side of things. We know that there's probably going to be something else, zombie side before the end of the year. I would be shocked if there isn't. But I mean, I think they had one other that they already semi-announced that's been looming, but I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. But to only get $800,000 on an IP that is just massively known. I mean, look at Terraria right now. At the time of me filming this, that is concurrently running, right? That is a game that had zero rulebook, zero gameplay, and zero realistic information on how it played with some, upgrades that has easily surpassed it well before the end of its funding goal. And I would make the argument that I would expect God of War to do just as well or better. Especially on the, fantasy, dungeon crawl-esque side of things that this hobby loves to throw godzooks of money just at the screen for. And again, I think it dips into there's a little bit too much. There's a little bit too much scope, right? You said this is going to be a 1 to 2 player game prior to launching, just like with Grim Coven, which I guess we're going to get to right after this because it ties in nicely. Grim Coven, you said you're going to give me boss battling. First update, oh, by the way, here's your campaign mode. Ish. God of War, by the way, first couple updates. Oh, here's your 3 to 4 player mode, right? Like, it's like what we saw for tons of time when crowdfunding was sort of not at its full steam ahead like it is now, right? Like 3, maybe 4 years ago, people would complain, whine, everything else in the comment section about not having a solo mode on so many games that designers often, too often, I would make the argument, acquiesced. Not all the time by any means. And then they ended up being sort of just half-baked and not great. And then again, people complaining, well, this isn't a good solo mode. I'm pissed off because you demanded a solo mode on a game that is area controlled for 3 to 5 players. What do you think? I'm just making this up, but you know what I'm saying. And you can't please these people. And so the argument that I'm making alongside of this, as I got, tangentially sidetracked, is that how many different modes do you need? Stalker, for example, just covered it in the crowdfunding look back, right? You have the this mode and then this mode, but this mode isn't even having the rulebook out a year after and before the pledge manager's closed. And as I said in the example in that video, I said, Bullet Heart, one of my favorite games of all time, top 10 of all time for me. I only play competitive. Love that game. Play it anytime I get the chance. I don't play it solo. I don't play it cooperatively against the boss. I play it competitively as much as I love it. And you find that that's what you're doing. So if you're giving me this game, God of War, if you're giving me Grim Covenant, if you're giving me I'm not probably going to play it with all those different modes, right? The campaign, the one-offs, that's where I wanted Grim Covenant to be, right? Like just the boss battler. But now you're throwing in, stories and narrative components and a mini campaign-ish, and you're giving me rotating boss. I just want purity from it sometimes. I don't need, that's why Bloodstone from Druid City Games failed, is because, they're supposedly going to come back sometime in the near future, I think-ish. But they went for the PvP and the PvE. They went for the player versus player and the player versus game. And people were like, I only want the player versus this. And that was one of the few campaigns I've actually seen people say that. I don't see it in some of these other games. And that begs the question. And that's why they went back to drawing board, because they said, we're not getting the funding we want because you got half the people doing this and half the people not pledging because they only want this. And then we're giving them both and they don't want to pay for both. And but this is where we have to do is you have to vote your wallet, because otherwise this is what you're going to see, right? And you're going to give somebody a free loan for 2 years. And again, like with a lot of the other Awakened Realms stuff, is it going to come better around the second time? That's the iterations we've seen with Tainted Grail and the changes with ISS Vanguard from Wave 1 to Wave 2, with Ether Fields, right? With Nemesis 1, 2, and 3, iterations, improvements. When is the time to get in on this, or are you just FOMOing? Because the other aspect of things, right, is if I said to you that this wasn't Awakened Realms, would you feel as comfortable throwing money at companies based off of purely gameplay-driven aspects alone and not as much on the pedigree or the aesthetic picture of things in the first place? If you did blind taste testing, in a sense, of board game style, A, B, B, A, mixed them up, presented them to groups of people and said, which game do you prefer? That's what you should be doing with this. And that's what I've seen more recently on crowdfunding as well. And this has been the other sour note recently on crowdfunding, is that there has been a lack thereof of rulebooks on some of the bigger campaigns. Not everything, but a couple notables. But also the rise of preview videos. I have seen the rise of preview videos. And conspiracy theory me, again, I'm wrong. Don't take this seriously. But conspiracy theory me, in the back of my head goes, companies want to pay people like myself. I'm not going to use anybody else's names. No, not putting, again, words in anybody else's mouth. They would rather pay me and not have me give an opinion on it, because that may present some fear, uncertainty, or doubt in backers' minds. Why isn't that video on the campaign page, right? But that's true with a lot of videos. I've had this conversation with 1 or 2 other people that do media, right? And they go, yeah, Chris, my video wasn't on that campaign page too, because I did exactly what you're just saying that they did. So it's no surprise necessarily to us when we do that. So that's also why whenever I, cover some of these crowdfunding campaigns, I go wink, wink, nudge, nudge, go check out Board Game Geek, because you might see a significant amount of video that's over there, or you might also see that truly it's only paid content. And again, just then be a little bit more on your guard about whether or not you actually know whether or not this game is right for you. And then that leads us into sort of the Grim Coven Gamefound Awakened Realms situation. And again, it's sort of a catch-all, if you will, because it ties into one of the direct bigger things that we have seen discussed in the last 6 months that I almost put out 1 or 2 videos on separately, but sort of holding that in my back pocket still, depending on how I feel about it, because it's controversial, right? AI art. Awakened Realms has been using AI art for some of their stuff. Ravensburger, with the upcoming remake of Puerto Rico, put a kibosh on it, said, And then people started looking at their other projects and going, okay, Dragon Eclipse, what are you doing there? And the statement that they put out was like, okay, well, sorry, not sorry. Also, not really, acknowledging it in the first place. One of those half apologies. And it was kind of that, okay, you know what? It's not the issue of you doing it. It's the making it seem like you're not doing it, right? I think that almost pisses people off more than the actual sometimes of doing it. Although AI art, again, blow up the comment section down below if I start getting into that one in this video. Though that sort of raised the question, how much do you care about that? Is it a big deal on our scene? Because the truth of it is, it's not going away. And the truth of it is, probably more people are going to start using it. So the only thing that I'm going to wonder is who's going to be upfront about it. Because if you can get away with it, I'm not condoning it by saying that, right? But the truth of the matter is, people are going to try. And is it, big key point here, as I say with a lot of things, is it going to affect this, right? It's really easy when one of those small publishers that you don't have a stake in, that you don't have a horse in their race, uses it. So then you see the pitchforks coming out and the torches. But when some of the bigger companies use it, what if one of these big companies, I'm not going to put a name on it because people are going to, spin my words in the comment section otherwise. But let's say some big company, let's say some company that raises 7 figures on crowdfunding, pick any one of the dozen, whatever plus more that have done that, right? What if one of them just says flat out, we're going to use AI art in our next big project, our next big project? Only thing that changes is how you vote with your wallets, period. Nothing else will change things. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You can't. And that ties into the where is all the money? You wonder why, or maybe you don't wonder why. We see, as I have said numerous times this year already, 2, 3, 4+ games, dungeon crawl, open world, scenario, sandbox, adventure, upgrade, anything along those lines, keywords, right? It's because that's where the money is. That's where people are throwing the money. As I talked about earlier with Earth, right? It's a rarity for things to hit 7 figures that are not super deluxeified euros or super deluxeified Amerithrashes. Whether, again, what you qualify that for and everything else. But that's why Awakened Realms always has a certain type of game. They're not drastically different, folks. You could probably use 3 or 4 of those keywords that I just threw out there in a keyword salad sort of smorgasbord situation word search style with every single one of their games. Same thing with CMON, right? You have shown them, I have shown them, again, because we don't talk about you, we talk about me. I've shown them, that's where I'm putting my money, right? So where do you think they're going to go? Where do you think? Why are you ever surprised? No one should feign any surprise whatsoever from that aspect of things. And if you do, you're just not paying attention in this capitalistic run hobby, just like everything else. Because where this is, that's where this is going to go. So we'll get off that tangent. Star Wars Unlimited. Now, I'm not going to go into it like you think I'm going to go into it, but I'm going to give them kudos because this has exceeded expectations, period. Probably the game most exceeding expectations this year. The meta has evolved. People thought before it was even released, they're like, this is the meta. The first month, everything is Boba Sabine. If you're not, you're out, right? And then all of a sudden, we've got the Krennics, we've got the Palpatines, we've got the Solos, we've got a little bit of Thrawn still sitting around there. And things are just going to get spun on their head with the second edition going into more of the bounty hunting, capturing mechanics side of things as well, with everything else we're seeing with some of the before and after the original series content. I mean, FFG has a big cluster FFG on their hands because they are just not allowing people to buy it. Set 1 has been out for a while, so they knew the freaking demand is high, and yet they're purposely underprinting this one too. I guess I say purposely, but you have to have some inkling that it's going to be selling more when you have people selling it for double the price, when you have Miniature Market or Game Nerds or whoever it is, right? Pick one of the online distributors right now that are selling the $119.95 MSRP box for $199. Not Joe Schmo, not FLGS down the road who get away with that crap sometimes or don't, you know, but the biggest of the bigs doing it. Come on now. Come on. And we're not talking about come on. So that's off-putting. Is that going to trickle down? Well, sort of. But you also have too many people still speculating collecting it too. So I don't think it's going to hamper it too much. But it's an interesting talking point because we have July and then we have November. This meta is going to get blown up with Wave 2. Blown up all over the board. And that's the one thing I guess I'll say is that is unexpected, especially after Wave 1. The talent and the amount of work that's gone in to make it so that you have 5 to 6 at least potential decks that could capture a tournament at any one time in an LCG after just one wave. That's freaking amazing. So kudos regardless. Then, you know what? Retail side of things, right? What is surprised at the retail? And the number one surprise at retail, I can't even get a copy. You can't find a copy. People aren't selling copies. Harmonies, right? Cascadia-esque vibes on the Spiel recommendation list. But you just can't get a copy right now. It's between prints, which is relatively amazing. This is probably the most hot game since Heat Pedal to the Metal. I just don't have any other way to describe it at this point. It has succeeded, surpassed any expectation. It has been on such a momentum trip that Heat is the only thing I can relatively compare it to in terms of the hotness and the inevitability in terms of people just wanting it right now and unable to meet that demand. Because the one before that I would dare compare it to is Wingspan, which, you know, 2-3 years from now, I would love to see the data on that side of things, because I was just recently surprised, as a side tangent here, trekking through the world from Underdog Games. Probably never on your radar, but I covered it in the crowdfunding roundup earlier this month. And they said that trekking through the world, right? A game that you probably have never played, maybe only even heard of, 130,000 copies. 130,000 copies over 4 years. And that's amazing, folks, in case you're not aware of copy numbers and selling. And that's the type of game you're looking for. And I wonder, in the last 2 or 3 years, are there any games that are going to mimic that or mimic anywhere close to a Wingspan? Because I put out a video early on this channel, like my first year of this channel, I said, I dared people to prove me wrong, that the most influential game in the last 10 years, has been Wingspan. Copies sold, broad market reach, availability across the board, hottest of the hot for as long as it came out, like a year afterwards. And so can any of these games replicate that we've seen with Heat or Harmonies, right? That have a little bit of that caught fire, but nothing sustainably close to it at the same time. And that'd be my question with something like this. Will it actually stand the test of time? Or I'm going to put this out there as well, because this is the other prevailing trend I have seen over the last couple of years, not to get too side tangential here, but this is my video, my channel, and my, best of the whole months and years. So we talk about whatever I want to talk about, right? I love this. And where I'm going with this is I think of the last 2 or 3 years on my side of things, and overarchingly speaking of general content, right? A couple years ago, Dwellings of Elderville came out. Best game ever next year. Ark Nova, best game ever next year. Earth, best game ever. You see where I'm going with this, right? And so is Harmonies best game? Well, I don't see anyone saying that, but that's my issue, right? How many of these games are going to actually stand the test of time is really what I was going for there. Because, I mean, you're seeing them best of eclipsed on a yearly basis, which just also begs the question, how much of that is just over knee-jerk reaction? Again, not talking about you, talking about me. Over knee-jerk reaction on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, right? And to be honest, that gets a little tiresome. It gets a little tiresome. You know, I'm staring right now at one of my favorite games. It's not from the past 5 years. I'm not even sure off the top of my head if it's from the past decade. Let's check. Did you know where I was going with that one? Yeah, right? What year is this actually put out? Let's see if I can actually find it right here. And it is 2012. Nope, not even within the last decade. So, how many of those do you see on lists? That aren't named like El Grande or Hansa Teutonica? Because those are also fantastic games. But that's my point, though. And I'll not argue that we aren't in the golden age of board gaming. What I meant by that is we are in the golden age of board gaming. But again, the latest hotness and hype, which is why I always put my quotes on when I do my weekly sort of news updates and upcoming crowdfundings, but also the hotness every week. Because I think it's important to know what's on there, but I also think it's a kind of a big joke. I do. I think it's a big freaking marketing joke from Board Game Geek. It is. Board Game Geek has jumped the shark. They've got more ads and promoted stuff on there than ever before, and that's a whole nother side tangent video as well. We won't get into that and where that money goes. But anyway, so that leads me into a portion of the video I wasn't planning on doing prior to filming this. And you know what? Let's talk about predictions for second half of the year, right? Where do I see being a big issue? What do I see coming of light? What do I think is going to make some waves? I think there are going to be a couple big surprises between now and the end of the year. I think some of these big companies have a little bit up their sleeve, and that's probably one of the things I've seen so far this year as well, is we're not getting this long-standing advancement of knowledge coming across with a lot of these games and campaigns, right? Like, we're just having a lot of cards being held very close to the vest. We've sort of seen what Awakened Realms has, you know, with their Feast. CMON really hasn't shown us anything past really DC United. So I would wager, depending on where the Winter Death one is at the end of this year, that maybe we see even another zombie side iteration sort of leak out at the end of the year, beginning of, you know, like first campaign or two of 2025. Apart from that, it's just a huge unknown. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another big video game IP or two, because again, that's where people have shown that there is some of this to make. And if you utilize it and strike the FOMO right, that people will throw money at it based on nostalgia. And I'll say there's going to be at least one more Harmonies-esque game that you haven't heard of at this point. Not crowdfunding delivered, not something you've heard of and are anticipating coming to retail already. I'm going to make a wager there's going to be at least one big one, Harmonies-esque, that is going to capture people's FOMO and grass is greener side of things as well. I mean, that's, again, you're looking at that and going, Chris, that's generic. Well, would you say that? There's going to be another Harmonies-esque, lighter style, not super heavy, appealing to mass, broad markets within the hobby along those lines in the last 6 months. I don't think it's that obvious. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Again, that's why I'm saying, right? I think it's going to be something that you haven't heard of, period. So we'll see. And that is where we'll leave things. 6 months, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, overviews, anti-hype, hype, all rolled into one. Highs and lows. There you go. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Stay classy. Have a great day. Peace out. See you around. Support the Bub Pip funded in X sentence. And that's where I wanted Gloomhaven